50 mil, whatever it might be, those lenses tend to focus closer than we normally use them. Standard zoom lens, you know, if you've got a DSLR with an 18 to 55 zoom on it, chances are you can focus about that far away from the front of the lens. So you can get really quite close to your subject. My 300mm lens I use a lot for close photography. It's got to be at least 4.5 feet away because that's as close as that focuses. But lots of people think of a 300mm lens as being for some, or longer telephoto lenses for things that are far away, but we can use them for close-up stuff too. Macro's got more specific meaning really, which is life size. So that means the subject that you're shooting, let's say it's a wasp, and that wasp is 20mm long. If you get to life-size magnification, one-to-one magnification, that we can get with a macro lens, that means that the image that that lens projects onto your sensor is the same size on the sensor as it is in real life. So your 20mm long wasp will be 20mm long on your sensor. If you've got a full-frame sensor, which is 36mm wide, that means you've got 8mm either end of that image. You've got some sound.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, do we?
No. I think that was the previous go. So sorry.
So we have that life-size magnification, and that's really, or at least approaching that. That's really where macro comes in. Talking about proper close-ups, if you like. But a lot of the shots that I show you tonight will just be with whatever lenses, not specifically macro lenses, and I don't want one-to-one magnification in a situation. So something like that. Beetle was probably about half-inch long. Something like that. I did want one-to-one magnification. To get that high magnification, but a lot of the time.
No, people out there say they can hear and see you, so carry on. I might have to add some light in a minute.
But there are a couple of things. But I will actually demonstrate something. Yes, so
no, I'm going to delete it. Don't worry. That's really unfair.
So yeah, so a lot of the time I'm not, even shooting with macro, I don't go to one-to-one magnification because that's too high magnification. So when people first start doing close-up photography, a lot of time they take pictures something like this, where the subject's just a lot of times people take them there, they see the pink flower and it's like, what? That's like the brimstone butterfly there. The first time I'd ever seen one of those land, I'd seen the fly past loads of them, but the first time I'd seen one land. And this was a shot with a macro lens, but it was the first picture I took before I moved in, a little bit closer. But as I started to move in, the butterfly flew away, and that was it. God. Had I got in closer and ended up with just the butterfly and the flower that it's on, I might have made a nice picture. But there's just, I'm not quite happy to have space around an image, but for this particular picture, there's just too much space there. I just didn't get close enough. I didn't get the subject big enough in the picture for it to be prominent as a subject. And I find that a lot of people, when they, especially if they've got their first macro lens, they tend to take pictures where the subject's too small. There's two reasons really for that, I think. One is they just don't realise how close you need to be with a macro lens in order to get a high magnification. If you're at that minimum focus distance, giving you one-to-one magnification, you're going to be just a few inches away from your subject. But it feels like that macro lens will give you this high magnification. And you might stand something down there and you stand up here and you're not getting that magnification. So there's one aspect to it. The other is it's very easy to kind of end up with tunnel vision. You're looking through the viewfinder, you've seen this subject that you're particularly interested in, and you can tune out everything else that's in the shot. And I've had a few people over the years come on to workshops and they've said, oh, I've got this macro lens, but it does something weird because when you're looking through, you see the subject nice and big, and then once you take the picture, it's smaller on the picture. There's more stuff in the picture than there was through the viewfinder. And there never is. It looks exactly the same through the viewfinder. Give or take a little bit. If your viewfinder doesn't show 100% of the view. But it's just generally that they concentrate so much on their subject, you don't see anything else around. So ideally, you want to get closer in or get a higher magnification, or certainly make our subject more prominent. So here, there's little ambiguity about what it was that I was shooting. You're probably not thinking, oh, that's a nice spot for bramble leaf. Shame about the butterfly that's getting. So this was down in Cornwall. I'm not going to name every species or anything that's on here, so but I will do the ones that I actually know. This is a clouded yellow butterfly. I was down in Cornwall on holiday, and it's a KLS year. It was an overcast day. It was the first time I'd ever seen one of these butterflies, knowingly, and there it was, 600 candles. So it was also the first study that I had my Manfrotto tripod. Up to then, I had a Unilog tripod, which is like a Benbow one, so it has a central kind of lock, the legs go all over the place and keep it in the shape and position. And it's very good for macro stuff, but it was a bit big and unwieldy and heavy. And the real problem was possibly the first or second day of the holiday. I walked all the way from a cliff top in Cornwall all right down to the beach, found a nice rock pool, taking pictures of the stones down there, undid the central bolt, which just loosens everything, dropped the camera down into position, went to tighten it up again, and it just span and span and span. The thread had gone, and the tripod was useless. And I'd already been thinking about getting a Manfrotto one, this was the first time I've used it. The particular thing that I like about this kind of tripod is that the legs go horizontal, not just one. So all the legs go out horizontal. The column goes horizontal as well. So you can have the legs out flat, you can have the center column flat. You can have the camera right down on the ground. Which is the tripod, which is particularly nice for macro. So I like this, and yeah, generally it just functions like a normal tripod that doesn't do something. This was literally the first time that I've used the tripod. I got the legs out flat, shuffled it, double blade, got this shot, and I'm looking down on the butterfly a little bit. So we've got areas that are out of focus, and as you'll see as we go through tonight, I'm not particularly governed by what a camera club judge might wish to see in a picture. I'm quite happy to have bits that are out of focus and bits out of focus and other bits that aren't. It sounds like. But I've got this picture. You can see the hair and the head and the pattern on the eye and everything. So there's lots of detail there. Certainly much clearer than that previous photo of the butterfly. But I did actually get the camera down lower and shoot across it a little bit more. I'll be more parallel or perpendicular to whichever way you look at it. And that winging focus. So being the first time I've used that tripod under the rock, the camera flopped over to one side, the butterfly. But yeah, there's certainly a lot more detail and it's much clearer what I was actually aiming for. One-to-one magnification, this kind of thing with the butterfly, depending on the size of your sensor. I use an APS-C size sensor camera. I can never remember what species of butterfly it is, either a painted lady or a small tortoise, something along those lines. But I can't see enough of it to clarify really what it is. So I don't always want to be going into this kind of So this is kind of what you could do with an actual macro lens that does -1 magnification. So the lenses and accessories we can use to do this are many, and they go from all different focal lengths. You know, it's macro stuff. So this is definitely a close-up shot. Shot with a Sigma 10 to 20 mm, 10 millimeters, and yeah, I didn't realise quite how close I was to the swan until I took the camera away from my eye, face to face with it. But what that wide angle does, super wide angle does, it gives context to that subject. It's not a macro shot because the swan was significantly bigger than the centre of my camera. It's easily fit upon that. But that wide angle shows us the environment. You can see the lake in the background, you can see the other birds, the houses, the quarry down near Lakeside, Chapel Gorge's notes as well. So yeah, you get context about it, and that's what these wide angle shooting close-up photography. This is over on the Welsh coast, Cardigan Bay, a place called Munt. Munt has a hill, which is Munt. Some cliffs at the bottom of the cliffs of the beach. So this is on the top of the hill. I found the toadstool and I only had the 10 to 20 mm with me. So I thought, well, I'll go in close, so I'll shoot with a wider angle, and that gives you context. So if someone recognises that bit of coastline, or if they knew that bit of coastline, they might recognise it as being Cardigan Island down there. And yeah, so again, you've got context. You can see what the weather's like. So the subject needs to be pretty big with those wider angles, but close up with those you want. Standard zoom, this is at 16 millimeters, so you're using a full frame camera, 24 mm equivalent, 12 mm, and yeah, wide angle. I mean, in as close to this foxglove as I can get. I've already seen the bee go into that foxglove. Waiting for it to back out again, because that makes it a lot easier to guess which one it's going to fly into. So I've got close to that, focus on there, that wide angle again gives us context. You can see those other foxgloves in the background, the weather's like, stuff like that. So wide angle, again, just as a standard zoom would work well. Epping Forest, Star Moss, standard zoom. I've zoomed in at 5 millimeters. Tripod looking straight down on the moss really. And the leaf there originally was a yellow one, which I took a couple of pictures of, and I thought actually there's a bit more contrast here. So I went and found myself an orange one instead and swapped them over. Then tucked it in underneath the moss, so it gives it that little bit more contrast. Well, contrast in the colours and contrast in the textures. It's not that spiky sort of thing. Again, standard zoom, absolutely fine. Yeah, a shot like that. Down on the beach in Portland. When you're into macro stuff and close-up stuff, you spend a lot of time looking at the floor, or looking along the tops of walls or on tree trunks and things to take pictures of. Walking on the beach, looking at the stones and soils with a kind of wonky smile on that stone there. And just got down, knees and elbows, and shot that. Only had to stand zoom lens with them, but it was fine. A big toadstool, again 45 mm, 45 mm, like 45 mm, that's as zoomed in as I can do with that lens. But again, works fine for that. Nice, big subject, you know, things like that are concerned. And it didn't need to be massively closer. But even something like metal rod and nothing in the end. Standard zoom, zoomed in as close as you get and still focus. I can't remember now if that's had a bit of a crop as well, but it's fine for showing that. The standard zoom lens can do an awful lot more close-up photography than necessarily anything other than that. Another lens that I have, it's generally in my bag, my 50. It's a 50 mm f1.4. This is shot at f2.8. Again, I'm down on knees and elbows. Across the subject, try and get the background a bit further away, and that will actually blur the background and not stand out. With that lens, minimum focus is about 50 centimeters, about a foot and a half, something like that. So it's not particularly close, and I often feel like I need to get the light a little bit closer. But I've often considered getting a 50mm macro lens instead. But I think that normally doesn't have it. The nice thing about 50mm is that it's got an aperture ring on it. Like you block the nutrition, explain what the aperture is going about. So getting down low, shooting across, I like contrast between the colours, the blue and the browns there, and that helps the subject stand out, but it's also that new life coming up with the depth foliage. I spent 12 years working for Essex Wildlife Trust at the Visit Centre at Takers Park in Romford. And we had a team meeting out at the Essex Wildlife Trust headquarters, which was a working farm. I think it is still a working farm. And the farm manager was showing us around, showed us some of the seeds and things that were grown for bird seed. Started with the business. This is canary grass. Getting with a 50mm, as close as I could get, F2.4. We've got that very shallow depth field, which concentrates the eye on the bit that I actually want people to look at, and it minimises the distractions. So, something like 50mm can do a perfectly good job close up, and then potentially do an even better job of close up. So we'll come to that in a bit. I've also got an old manual focus Sigma 24mm lens. I had it since I shot film, and it's one of those things that just kind of sits in the cupboard, and then every now and again comes out, might take it out to. I've gone out with family, so I've not taken up the bag full of stuff. So what lens is this? Take the camera out, one lens. I'm lying on the floor. These hellebores over a little bit, so I'm lying on the floor, looking up, and got the light coming through the bushes in the background. I took a lot of shots of that to make sure the focus was exactly where I wanted it to be. Because the DSLR with a smallish viewfinder and manual focus is not always necessarily used to calculate precisely. But for toadstools and things, I particularly like that lens. Again, it's not a macro, it's labelled as a macro lens, it's not a macro lens. And it does focus nice and close, but we've still got that wide open, and it gives us so you having a bit of woodland in there is well done. Oh, man. What time do you call this? We missed all the good ones. We're just showing the rubbish now. Yeah, quite well. I'm so going to try and be I think just, yeah, quite well. That's a benefit. That's like the rendition. It's just a handy, just an old focus. An option for getting closer, but still using your bog standard lenses are extension tubes. Extension tubes are over in the dark. Extension tubes are like that. So they're not just literally tubes that put glass in them, and they go between the lens and the body of the camera. And they move that lens further away from the sensor than it would have been without it. Three, or I could say set 2. So there are different lengths. So there's one that's 30mm, I think, 21 and 31, but there'll be varying length depending on the manufacturer. But those different amounts of extension will give us different magnification. So say they go between the lens of the body of the camera, push that lens over. So my macro lens, as you're punching closer, that gets longer and longer. So that's its minimum focus. Focus out there. If I then put an extension tube between it, it pushes that lens even further away from the sensor, and it means it will focus close and still. essentially what's happening is out the back of that lens is a cone of light. Normally cover your sense. When you put an extension tube in there, that cone of light spreads out further, and your sensor sees a smaller proportion of that light coming out. The longer and longer that extension, the more that light spreads out, and the smaller reception you're seeing, and the higher magnification you get. And the nice thing about extension tubes is you can use them with different lenses. So I'm using one of them here with a 24 lens. It's the shortest extension. This total in the foreground is already all the front element of the lens. So if I put any more extension on it, that total will have to be inside the lens. It's generally not a good thing with lenses. I saw customers slightly off it. I went down to a customer's house the other day. She'd been on a workshop and we were looking at the light rooms. We were looking at another light. The focal length was obviously different, but the total rendition of the lens was different. It looked less contrasty, didn't look sharp. And I said, have a look at the lens just in case you've got like a really smeary filter on the no filter on the front. And I held it up to the light. I was fungus-ridden lens. It was literally like a haze of fungus all across the lens. Whoa, yeah, don't put that on camera anymore. So, yeah, so generally, wider angle with the extension tubes means we can get closer. You've still got that wider field of view so we can see the other totals going off in the background. Some extension tubes, I can't remember how many, with a 50mm lens. 50mm lenses tend to be very good quality, very high quality, and if you use those as extension tubes, you're in a good place to get good results macro-wise, because if you've got the 50mm lens and you use the extension tube, you're going to be active or around lifestyle applications, so you can be getting the same deal from a macro lens, but extension tubes are significantly cheaper. The problem with extension tubes is let's say I've got my lens on and so imagine this is a 50mm lens and I've got about a foot and a half away and I can't focus any closer, but I want to get closer to this lizard. So I'm about a foot and a half away from this lizard and the lizard and then I've fiddled around, I've gone pat to pat or whatever, and the lizard goes, well, I'm out of it, disappears inside the dry stone wall. But I've got to assume it's going to come, move back into place, refocus again. What I'm going to do that lens now is focus on infinity. So although I've got that minimum focal distance, if I focus the lens on infinity, I've got an extension tube that bring that or that distance down. And after a minute or two, lizard comes falling back out again. And I've already got focused, I've got in position focused on the stone there. So, so that's okay. So I can start taking pictures and then I can focus a bit closer until I realise I can't focus any closer anymore. That's the first off. Get to that extension tube. So now I take the lens off, put another extension tube on, so this is good, and it comes back down again. So in that respect, they're not ideal. You need to keep changing things if you're getting that higher and higher magnification. I did end up with all three extension tubes. I can't remember how many were on for this shot. But the lizard seemed fairly stick along that stone. For this one here, I had a macro lens by this point. What was down was I was about 3 feet away from the bank of the pond. So in order to get that kind of magnification with my macro lens, I fancy that. So I used 3 focus down to about. Normally only focus about 5 feet. With the extension tubes, that brought it down to about 3 feet. I could get that shot. as I wanted it without getting my feet wet. So extension tubes can be a really good way of getting that potentially one-to-one magnification depending on what lens we're using them with, and but it's a kind of a bargain price. 2020, from May 2020, lockdown, spent a lot of time. I dug a pond in the front garden, been meaning to do for years. Got around and spent a lot of time out there with my 300mm lens with 2 extension tubes on the front. So it would bring that minimum focus down to about 3 feet, and then photographing in the middle of the pond, still laying on the bank. So that was quite nice. Similar to extension tubes, we can have bellows, and bellows are stretchy tubes, if you like. You know, think of old cameras with the bellows on the front there. Again, you fit a lens to one end and the other end. Stretch that bellow in and out, and it will go from something like 2 inches. Magnification, and you can just keep increasing the magnification and keep switching things around. This is a little seed from a plant, I think it's a burdock or something like that, and the seed is probably about a quarter of an inch long. Sitting on some water. I've my 50mm lens on the front of these bellows, but that 50mm lens is backwards. And in fact, a really good one. True macro photography, potentially free, you might get if you've got a 50mm lens with an aperture ring on it, you can literally just put it backwards on the front if you want one magnification. So looking through there, my fingertip is in focus there. My fingertip. So if you've got a lens knocking around and system. So you could be shooting on a Nikon, but you've got an old with a 1.8 50mm lens. As long as it's got an aperture ring on it, so you can set the aperture and then you can literally just turn it around. You can start combining like getting that 50mm lens reversed in front of my macro lens will give me about 2:1 magnification. It acts just like a magnifying glass. I can just hold it there, you can get things to attach it, but generally, I want to do it. You can use that and start using on that magnification if you so want. You've got teleconverter, use that for magnification. Doesn't mean you can focus any closer, it gives you higher magnification from the distance. I did this last actually a shoot Pentax. So a few years back, on the Pentax YouTube, I posted a picture of a penny like this and said, I noticed under the Queen's head on you've got these little IRB. They're the additional 12 plus point. It turned into, I mean, these are about a third of a millimetre. It turned into a challenge about who could get the magnification. And at the time, first time I did it, I ended up with 7,300 with the about 24 millimetre front. The bigger the difference between those focus, the higher the magnification. As far as I understand it, a 100mm lens and a 50mm lens on the front, you'll get 2:1 magnification because 100 is twice. And if 300mm is 24, give me 16 times magnification. 12 times magnification. So I also had 6 extension tubes on there as well, and a 1.4 times teleconverter. The penny was just on a bit on a piece of right above the end, and was backwards and forwards focus blog in a little bit. It took me about half an hour to get everything in focus. It wasn't particularly well in focus, but it gave me a decent magnification, funny enough. I did it again a few years later. So this is my current. So it's not a thumb back with my standard zoom time was 16 meters. Divided by and something like that. I've also got three extension tubes on there. No teleconverter at that point. The coin is now taped to the lens. The image that I got is this. So quality is not because of many things really, but because it's not being an ideal setup. This is upside. I'm going to get it in the right sort of place. That's the B, and there's the front of the R over there. So bearing in mind these tests, a third of them high in my sector, 16 millimeters high. That's roughly 48 times magnification. Utterly impractical. Unless I'm larger well, I could focus it. But yeah, we can start being kind of sort of get creative with the accessories and the things that we can use to get magnifications without a macro lens inside. I use 300mm lens a lot for close-up photography. Yeah, minimum focus distance 4.5 feet, 1.5 meters, and so it's that close kind of thing, but it's not. But what I particularly like about 300 is the very narrow angle of view that you have. So it gives you really good control over the background, that bright sky in the background. I only have to shift to the left a little bit and cross that, and this background and fill the frame. If I wanted more of that dark background, shoot across that subject. They give you a lot of control, and I just want the rendition. It's good at picking out subjects in amongst the whole of the subject. Again, controlling that background. So if I've used about 6 feet away from this, it's a bracket. There are some bluebells and woodland on an overcast. If there's sky in the shot, it would have just been pure white because it would have been that brighter than the light that was reaching. So that trend really gave me that much narrower angle of view than I could have done. Macro lens probably would have been equivalent of what, certainly if I'd use a standard zoom or something, almost sort of shot. Zooming in more, or putting that longer lens on, and the bluebells see either in the background. But we've also got a polarizing filter on them. We'll look at that as well. Polarizing filters taking off the photo. And I've got a reflector. Camera's on a tripod, legs out flat, centre on horizontal. Right, how nice, ground level. Reflects over here. That's a bit of light back underneath, but the stem is quite convoluted bit. So yeah, I liked, I love that kind of amethyst deceiver toast, hornbeam woodland. Camera's actually lying on the floor. I was using sticks to prop it up. That's F4. It's got very shallow depth of field, literally just the very front edge of the toast. It's more or less blurred. We think back to that coastal shot that I showed you on the top of the cliff, where you can see the coastline. Holding an eye off the distance, you can see what the sky was like. Totally different for that longer lens. Coming back and zooming in, you use that context of where that was, know roughly which part was it, and watches. But I wouldn't be able to go to the spot where I shot that from because there's no context. And I could have just rubbish. Actually, that was on my lounge table, and there's an orangey sort of background, and there are things there, and Could be on a road version, could be anywhere. There's no contact. Again, the route goes surround the hills, about 8 or 9 feet away from here. That filter here, take the time of the captain totals reflector to bounce a bit of light back up underneath there. And again, it's given me that control of the background, so I'm not getting bright sky. Shots iris, there's a whole flowers. It's over at the orange on that high wall. I use the 300mm just to pick up position of flower. Choose that flower. It's giving me that control over the background. It's not just the colour, but nice. And I'm waiting for a bee to come along. Cam's on a tripod. I'm just waiting for that. And when a bee starts flying, it bursts. It would work. If you're in that sort of environment, you can't necessarily go, I don't appreciate looking through the flower beds. That long lens allows you to get shots of bigger insects without actually having to go. Dragonflies, a decent sized insect like that, 300mm lens or something along those lines gives you plenty of magnification for a decent shot of the whole insect. This has had a little bit of a crop simply because this is on a pond dipping platform and I was lying down looking sideways through the viewfinder and everything was a little bit wonky, so I straightened it out and then kind of cropped it to avoid white bits in the corner. But plenty enough magnification with that kind of lens. And if you were looking at doing something like dragonfly in flight, then the longer the focal length, the better, really, because they're probably not going to be right in front of you. The technique, if you've got some of these mirrorless cameras these days, they've just got phenomenal autofocus, and if you've got something that can lock onto the dragonfly and follow it around, then by all means use that. Lots of cameras won't do that though, so what I tend to do is just watch them for a start, see where they're flying. A lot of them will patrol a pond and they'll do the same sort of route over and over again. And so I'll see what the closest point is that they're coming to and focus manually a couple of, a foot or so beyond the closest bit they can come to. And then follow it around without refocusing. So it's out of focus most of the time. As it starts to fly across again, so it's getting closer, as it looks as though it's nearly coming to focus, I'll just do a burst of shots and it'll fly through that distance. And if you're really lucky, it'll be in just the right spot when one of those shots happens and you'll get a nicely focused picture. But if autofocus does it for you, then by all means use that. So the 300mm lens, I think worked really well. So there's longer focal lengths. I use 300mm. Works very well for these sorts of things, and that's fine. But a macro lens just allows you to go closer and closer and closer until you get up to that one-to-one magnification if you want it. It's not one-to-one magnification, but it's kind of heading that way. And we don't have to change accessories, we don't have to start screwing things on or whatever as we're changing that distance, we just refocus as we're moving in. If you're definitely sure that you want to do macro stuff, then invest in a macro lens because it's the best way to go ultimately. It just gives you kind of very good quality and if you're using extension tubes with different lenses, you're relying on the quality of the lens that you're putting on those extension tubes to give you good enough quality once your sensor is essentially cropping down on a small section of it. Macro lens is designed to be working with these magnifications, so it will give you good results anyway. This was on a tripod. I've actually been taking pictures of toadstools, which were off to the right-hand side, and then I saw that she was sitting there, so I turned the camera around and took this. This was f8. Got the camera nicely sort of parallel to the body. I think it was a half a second exposure. She wasn't moving anywhere, so I could keep the ISO down low, and that was all fine. I did a macro workshop the other day, and I said she. Someone in the workshop said, "All your insects are she." And I said, well, no, they're not. It's just you can see her ovipositor down there. That's what she lays her eggs with. And then promptly went on to something else that was a boy instead. But I don't know about this one, to be honest. I can't tell. not got the right bits to see on this one, but once you start doing these close-up shots, it can get a little bit addictive because you start seeing spiky legs or just hairy legs and patterns on eyes and things like that, and it can be quite absorbing, really. This little boy. He's a sickle-shaped ovipositor. It looks like a little sickle. If it was a girl, but it's a boy. Only a young one, probably about 1/4 of an inch long, maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's very much a small thing. Trick is, I took a lot of pictures of him because his antenna were waving around all the time. There's only a few shots that I actually got both in the shot. Most of the time, one of them was sticking out the side. Yeah, macro lenses are just so much more kind of cool for the types of shots that you can do, and as I say, just very good quality. This is a fruit fly on the wing of a butterfly, and this has been cropped down to probably about 1/8 of the original size, something like that, and there's still plenty of detail shown on there, bearing in mind it's projected at a relatively low resolution anyway. So yeah, I'm just going to show a couple more pictures of these kinds of things. It's looking down on a duck's feather with some droplets on there. Most people tend to go for something around about 100mm as their kind of first macro lens. What those lenses tend to be is not too big and heavy, and you don't have to get kind of ridiculously close to your subject to get that 1:1 magnification. But you can get macro lenses in all different focal lengths. This was shot with a 35mm. I've shot a damselfly fly at 1:1 magnification with a 35mm before, and you end up being somewhere about 1 inch away from the subject, and it takes again a lot of patience, but generally it's fine. The difference with those different focal lengths, you could go up to 200mm or 180 or something like that. The difference with those different focal lengths is the angle of view that you're getting. You should get the same magnification. So in theory, your subject would be the same size. But if you're shooting at 35mm, 100mm, and 180mm, for a start, you're going to be a lot closer at 35mm. You'll be further away with the longer the focal length is. But that angle of view is changing as well, and you're going to see less and less of the background. This was shot through a window at Hanningfield Reservoir. He was sitting on the windowsill. But it would look different if I'd been further back with 100mm than I was right up against the glass with 35. I've been speaking exclusively about interchangeable lens cameras, whether that's mirrorless ones or DSLRs or rangefinders as well. But some of you might be shooting with bridge cameras or compact cameras, and that's absolutely fine. You've got choices then with how you can do close-up photography. One is to zoom in and stand far enough back that the lens will actually focus. For lots of cameras, that's about 6 foot, 2 meters, something like that. So you zoom in, stand back, as I did here. This was at Mount Fitchett Castle. It's one of the tails of one of the peacocks there. And he didn't let me get in close. If I tried to get in close, we'd walk further away anyway. So zooming in with the little Lumix TZ80, and I could kind of isolate a little bit of the tail, and that was fine. The other option is to go wide. So you go out to the widest angle and you switch to the macro mode. For lots of those cameras then, it means that your subject can be 1 inch away, maybe less than that, 1/2 inch, 1mm, not 1mm, some of them you can actually touch the front of the lens, a centimetre or something like that. You can be much, much closer. And then we get that wide angle look again, so you can see trees in the background. It kind of feels like we're in that flower because the front of the lens is actually in that flower. So it's a different look again, but it can work very well. Plus, that camera's so much more convenient than carrying around or a whole load of bag full of stuff. Good detail in there. We can see the hairs and things on there. The downside of compact cameras really is the quality, especially around the edges of the shot. You tend to find a lot of them they'll be a bit smeary and whatever. It's kind of a little bit squishy kind of around the edges. So there's always going to be compromises. Whichever way you go, that sort of kit is bigger and heavier. As I'm pointing at my camera back, bigger and heavier and more expensive, but ultimately it'll give better quality. But if you don't want to carry around or spend all that kind of money, then the compact or a bridge camera is a very good option. As far as using the polarizing filter, I've mentioned that a couple of times now, using the polarizing filter. If you're aware of polarizing filter, you might only really think about it for landscapes. Polarizing filter takes reflections off surfaces. So I can see a vague reflection of the light that's coming out the front of the projector. If I've got a polarizing filter, I might be able to take that shine off of the floor, and I'd see the proper colour of the floor rather than the whitish kind of shine to it there. You've probably got the reflection of the screen on the floor if you can see the floor. Polarizing filter can take that shine off. We put the filter on, we'll rotate it on the front of the lens, and we can potentially see that shine coming and going. So blue sky gets deeper blue because it takes a reflection off the dust particles and things like that. It takes shine off the surface of water if you want to see down into water. On a scene like this, which is quite a small scale, it's just a couple of toadstools in your parents' lawn. There's no artistic merit in this, purely to illustrate the effect of polarizing filter. Without the filter, it kind of looks like a fairly plain cap on that. You can see the gills, see the lines from the gills on there, but not an awful lot else really. You've got that reflection of the grey sky that was there. The grasses look a little bit shiny and a little bit kind of washed out as well. Putting the polarizer filter on, rotating it until you see the effect that you want, can have really quite a marked difference on there. And I do like, especially using polarizers with toadstools, but anywhere where there's some foliage, I'll often use the polarizer just because it helps to enrich those colours.
Is it nearly tea time?
I was just thinking, is it nearly tea time? It's nearly tea time because we've come to the end of this. You put the kettle on now. How long does the kettle take to come on? 2 hours.
Yeah, a couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes. There's no point going on another section, really, then, is there?
No, well, let's just break there then.
Let's break there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Thanks very much, Daniel.
Right.
I'll go and find the lights.
Yeah, over it. Right. If anyone's got any questions while they're waiting for the tea, then feel free to ask. If you have, there we go.
You share the crop sensor.
Yes.
It's your 300 mil, 300 mil.
It is a 300 mil, and it's on a
600 mil, 300.
450 mil. But
I was thinking
1.5 APS size, so yeah, it's 1.5 times magnification. Yeah. I do occasionally, actually, last Monday night, not this one, just gone, but the week before, I was up in Bishop Stortford to the Beekeepers Association, where I did a shortened version of this talk before before we had a slight break, and then most of the people there were shooting with a mobile, so we were doing that. Some phones are better at close-up stuff than others. I mean, this has got a macro camera on it, so it's got four individual little cameras. It's got a super wide, it's got the standard one, it's got a macro, and then one of the others is the depth perception, just to give it 3D kind of vision. The macro lens, I think, is only 2 megapixels, whereas the normal one is something like 16 or 48 if I want to have it on 48. So although you can physically get in closer, it's between 3 and 5 centimeters with a macro lens, it's probably not actually an awful lot of difference from doing that to shooting with a normal one and then cropping it down, because I'd end up with a very similar kind of megapixel thing anyway. Right there.
Working out how that's supposed to work.
That goes round the lens.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, phones can work surprisingly well, especially the sort of the latest generations. They're quite phenomenal, really. What you could do is get a Pentax and you wouldn't have to care whether it's raining or not.
Well, I've got an Olympus, that's it.
Yeah, we need stuff like
I always wanted a gimp.
What's a gimp?
that. It looks like a very elaborate COVID mask, actually, doesn't it? They don't do things around this to go you get to see out. Fine.
Yes, sir, it's a double to go down to them.
Oh, look at that. Yeah, it's all I used to use before I had a
Shower caps. You know,
shower caps. But
they're
yeah,
very
yeah.
cheap ones you get in the hotel.
Yeah, so you nick them out of the hotel. That's it.
Yeah.
That just looks like a.
Yeah, it's really elaborate. I've got one and it's just got an elastic end that goes over your legs. And it's over the back and you've got a bit of Velcro. Go over the camera.
Yeah, Neil, sugar. Just hot water, literally hot water. Thank you. So no tea, no milk, no sugar, no coffee.
Oh, that's how it works.
Yeah, that's
Very good.
Yeah. There's so many options.
When you get in there, you can see things that you can
That in the rain, you're open, there's no one else allowed to see.
for a few years.
It looks more like a pair of see-through underpants.
What I found with my one is, this goes around the front, and it stops the bloody camera from focusing.
Yeah.
I bought a cheaper version many years ago. And, you come around the front, of course, you have a camera that then comes in now. It won't do it.
Yeah.
We're very welcome to telephoto, because it's all internal.
Yeah, for things like dragonflies, it's a 300mm length and one takes off the bird. Yeah, absolutely. But you don't have to get too close to them. And they're big enough to still give you especially with a white 4/3, you've got I've got an Olympus, so it's, yeah. The thing is, just but no, yeah, we use the 300mm a lot more. But I think we're the second camera, we'll stick a long lens on
And this is a cover for a shoulder. But
Oh, hang on, we're going to set this up.
all right, You can eat it, it's calories, isn't it?
I don't think we'll put it on with the, on the truck. Yeah, hang on, you have to open it.
Yeah.
You have to open it up from here, get it on. Go right inside. Can you see it? So that's undo it. Yeah, we did work out how it all goes together. It's quite fat, because this now will tighten up around the leg.
Something like that.
Yeah.
By now it's not raining, so.
Yeah.
Get a walk.
There you go, right? Yeah, that's awesome. See you fantastic. It's fine. Yeah.
You'll never see through the viewpoint.
Well, view through the viewpoint is when it's somewhat limited. Yeah, I mean that's pretty kind of better than it could be, but I suppose you could see it, but yeah, weatherproof cameras are all in place. There you go.
Oh, yeah, no, you don't want that. I thought that was the guy with their head.
There you are.
Yeah. There you go.
You should probably use like that.
I mean, it's fine if you're out
You
in
need to just phone it.
bad weather for a extended period of time. Yeah.
Express started raining, Joe.
I love that.
Day one, day two, day
See
three.
what, someone's had to think about how to put it all together and make it.
Then they got a real choice.
They were happy.
And then we served it. An hour or so. We're on Zoom. And then one of them, he couldn't hear. And we were going through every single image. They took a lot of images. I sent him
You don't think it's got any room in the camera.
and we transferred.
That's how we've done it. That is the tricky part.
Play was quite fun.
So,
And that,
some situations, you've got the camera on the tripod. Occasionally,
all the higher,
yeah,
the hall
then we've got
1,000.
right.
Well,
The next section is something like So yeah, most of the time.
That's all printed around there. You know, on the base.
So yeah,
The wood, the best argument.
yeah, I do take it. Got the extension too. Certainly with 3 hours. Some of them more than others, depends on my own time. Most of the time I will shoot it with something a little bit smaller than I'm actually walking to these, especially on hand. If I'm hand-holding my subject might not be right exactly how I want it, but I'll go right in as close as I can. Yeah, it's yeah, there's no room for adjustment. So yeah, a little bit less than 10%. But yeah, sometimes people think actually it would be a lot more impressive if it was just hip and shoulders in the fly or something like that, rather than not flying or yeah, everybody goes through lots of yes. But then I use Lightroom so much keeping track of yeah, so if there's Photoshop that we do, vast majority of the time it's with it's either doing something like Photoshop or I want to add some so focus stacking, I would do process all the image in Lightroom, export to a folder, and do the focus stacking. So yeah, but I mean that is mainly because when I was 3 years ago, actually, I started subscribing to that, and before that, I was on 5. Photoshop 62, when I went from so 7 with over 10. CS2 really didn't work to do something. And all the menus, the pictures, exactly, you click somewhere. So that's when I first got to so I got used to using the things I guess it's doing leaflets and absolutely. So yeah, so that's when I can I don't know.
Yeah, apparently so. How many does it say is on there, Daniel?
I don't know. I can't see where it's. Oh, four.
It's a little tiny.
Yeah, yeah, four.
Four. Yeah.
Testing.
I'll try it.
Slide 52.
That's right. Can be there. I tried to get.
Right, can I be back in your seats, please? Time. You're not here to enjoy yourselves. Yeah. Right.
That's what I thought, isn't it?
Oh, there we go.
I'm a bit of mood lighting going on.
Right, eyes down for round two. I've done it. Yeah, we've gone all moody.
Dark enough, isn't it? But I have got some things to actually show you in this section. So, right, okay. So the approach, very nice biscuits, by the way. Thank you very much. That's about as much judging of camera clubs that I do. The biscuits, and you exceeded what most clubs do. So that's good. Okay, so the approach that I use will depend on the type of subject. There's two main approaches that I use when I'm doing macro photography, and yeah, it depends on what type of subject it is. So if it's a subject, something like this, dragonfly or a butterfly, or that lizard or something that could easily disappear at a moment's notice, I tend to be hand holding, certainly with something like this. If I was to try and get a tripod into position, there's a very good chance that the leg of the tripod is going to hit the bush that the thing's sitting on, and it's going to fly off, and that's going to be it. So yeah, chances are I'm going to be hand holding. Some people use monopods. Just for that extra stability. I don't. If I feel the need for a monopod, I just extend one leg on the tripod, and I've got a monopod because I'll have the tripod with me anyway, so I can use that. But I don't have a monopod specifically. So I'm hand holding, and I'm going to start with a picture from a little distance away from it anyway, because I'm not great with identifying things like dragonflies. I can recognise some of them, but when it's a hawker like that, I wouldn't necessarily know what sort of species that was. A shot from a distance just so I can identify it for a start. It could be a lesser spotted dingle dangle that's never been seen in the UK before, but it was a southern hawker, so it doesn't matter. But so taking a picture from a distance, but that also allows me to start thinking about what sort of settings might be working for this, and what sort of angle I might want to be approaching, because I don't want to go charging straight in for a high magnification shot, end up just a few inches away from it, and then think, actually, this is the wrong angle for this, and then have to back off and move around and then come in again. So if we start having that thought when we're that bit further away, it just saves coming in and potentially scaring things off. The more times you approach it and move around it, the more chance there is that you're going to scare it off. So I shot this and I thought, actually, this isn't a good angle for this. You've got that dead leaf in the background there. There's lots of kind of dark areas and sunlit leaves and things like that. So it's quite a messy background. It identifies the insect, and you can see the wings are transparent and whatever, but it's not. I didn't think it was. I didn't consider it the best angle to shoot it from. These leaves are kind of only just a few inches below it, so they're going to be relatively detailed. So I thought, no, instead I'm going to come around to the side and shoot across it instead. So shooting from over on the right-hand side over there, shooting across, because then the background is going to be the next bush along, and it's going to be, those leaves are going to be distinctly further away, distinctly more blurred. So I came round to the side and shot it from there. So that's with a macro lens. Well, the other one was a macro lens as well. Bearing in mind that probably about that long, something like that. I've got the extension tube. That's confusing. That would have been something like about that far away. So, I'm about that far away from the subject. I'm not super close or anything like that. I've got the camera pretty much, about as parallel to the body of the insect as I can. So we haven't got its facing focus, but the end of its tail's going out of focus or anything like that. And I'm using a technique that I've used for years for getting sharp shots of small things. When I first started, I used to use, I used to take individual pictures, and what looked good on the tiny little screen on the back of my first DSLR often turned out not to be so good once you got it onto a computer. I'd look at that and think, oh, that's good, faces in focus and everything, and then I get it on the computer and think, oh, it's just a bit too far backwards, a little bit too far forward, and actually that eye's blurry. And that would be quite frustrating. And at some point, long before I had my macro lens, I was using the 50mm lens and extension tube, so I didn't have autofocus then either. But at some point, I started using this technique. If your camera's got a phenomenal autofocus and it focuses on just the bits of the subject that you want it to, and it doesn't suddenly lose focus and start hunting around all over the place, then by all means use autofocus. Again, with the cameras these days, where that, especially the mirrorless cameras, where the focusing can be absolutely phenomenal, then you may well find that you don't need to use this technique. But again, lots of people struggle with that focus and just getting it exactly where they want it to be. And it's just really frustrating to find out that that focus is a little bit too far back or a little bit too far forward. So what I started doing at some point, can't remember whether I'd read about it or just tried it, was use continuous shooting. So, this does 12 frames a second, but the camera I used for this was 2.5 frames a second. So it doesn't have to be really fast frames, but it helps. I was using manual focus, so I'd just adjust that focus to give me the kind of magnification that I'm after. So I wasn't trying to focus on the subject and just take one picture and go, that's fantastic. I'd be roughly focusing to get the subject the right kind of size in the viewfinder. And then I wouldn't touch the focus until I was looking to change that magnification. So I've adjusted that, I've got to say a subject here, and I've roughly focused on it. I'm not going to try and stay absolutely still, not tensing up, just relaxing. And as you relax and you breathe in and out, you'll sway about. And as you're looking through the viewfinder, as you're gently moving around, you'll see the subject coming in and out of focus because you're gently moving backwards and forwards. You're not doing lunges. I've explained this in my workshops before, and then seen people going like this. It's like, it's not, you don't need anywhere near that kind of thing, because the depth of field with the macro, once you're into these high magnifications, it's so shallow that you don't have to move much at all for it to be completely focused. So you get it roughly in focus, you stand there and you'll sway about just gently anyway. And as it looks as though your subject's coming into focus, I'm just going to do a burst of shots, and you'll get a series of pictures that move back through your subject or forward, depending which way you've done it. Logically, most of those are going to be not focused where you want them to be. And that's fine, because hopefully one of them is focused where you want it to be. But to hedge your bets, you do it again. As you sway back again, you're going to do another series of shots. And then you just do that a few times. You'll end up with potentially 24, 30, 50, 100, whatever, how many shots you end up with. Pictures where 99% of them might be out of focus, but you've got one photo in there that is absolutely focused where you want it to be. And I find that much more preferable than trying to take one picture and finding out that it's not actually focused where you want it to. And then when you think, okay, I'm pretty sure that I've got all those that is focused where I want it to be, then you can move in a little bit closer, roughly focus again, and do the same again, and keep moving in and doing it again and again. It sounds kind of hit and miss because it is, but the idea is that you at least get one hit in amongst all that lot, even if all the others are guaranteed to be misses. If you're smooth enough when you're doing it, you could end up with a series of photos that you could use for focus stacking, where you're going to merge all those pictures together and create one picture where you have greater depth of field. If your camera's got focus bracketing, which more and more cameras have these days, unfortunately my one doesn't, focus bracketing is where the camera refocuses between shots. So you take a series, you normally tell it how many photos you wanted it to take, press the shutter button once and off it goes, and it refocuses and takes a whole load of photos. Essentially, it's doing the same thing. So you could just think, well, I'm a little bit in front of it, or focus a little bit in front of it, I'm going to have a series of shots that go back, I'm going to do that, and then in amongst all those pictures, it's going to be one that's focused where you want it to be. So for that, I did that. You know, I would have probably done half a dozen times, gently swaying backwards and forwards, and ended up with a focus just along the edge of the body there, where I wanted it to be. Wings are out of focus. This is at f5.6. We've got quite a shallow depth of field. To keep that background more blurred, I'm not worried about those wingtips going out of focus. But using that technique meant that I ended up with a shot amongst all that lot that got that okay. I then moved in closer, refocused roughly, and did the same again. So I'm just gently swaying backwards and forwards. So again, this is a 2.5 frames a second camera. I had to move a lot less. I had to be a little bit more slapdash with this camera because it's taking more photos. And again, so many cameras, mirrorless ones especially, have ridiculously high frame rates if you want them to, and you can almost guarantee you're going to get a shot there. So we've just got really focused across the side of the body and side of the face and on his elbow, but the important bits there are sharp, and I'm quite happy with that. And then I went in closer, went into one-to-one magnification. It doesn't actually look any bigger on here because it's now portrait format shot. But with one-to-one magnification, I've done the same again. High magnification gives me shallow depth. So f5.6 because that was my first DSLR and I was very reluctant to raise the ISO. Still being, I used to shoot Velvia slide film, so I was used to kind of 50 ISO, which I rated at 32, and then having a camera where it went up to 3,200, it's quite grainy by then. So I used to shoot up to 200 ISO because that's the lowest on that camera. Shutter speed was 250th of a second. So at that time, I was thinking, well, I want to keep that shutter speed up faster to minimise the possibility of camera shake. There's a rule of thumb that says to avoid camera shake, you put one over your focal length. So if you've got a 100mm lens on, in theory, you could use 100th of a second and you're not going to get camera shake. But that's when you focus on infinity. And as you focus closer and closer, and you're getting higher and higher magnification, you're magnifying everything, including the camera shake. So you want to get that shutter speed up faster. And the higher and higher the resolution of the camera as well, the finer, smaller amount of camera shake it's able to record for you, which is nice. So your shutter speed needs to get faster as well. So these days I'm aiming for 500th per second as a minimum really for hand holding. And it does mean that my ISO's often at 1600, 3200, something like that. But these cameras these days, again, are much more capable in that regard. Those days, f5.6, 250th per second and 200 ISO. So yeah, getting shallower depth field than perhaps I might have liked, but I was kind of restricted by the equipment I was using. If you've got a subject that's compliant, it's sitting there. These were, this photos I'm showing you from this holiday cottage garden in Cornwall. Lovely sunny day. The dragonflies have been flying around all day. Kind of mid-afternoon, they just must have been absolutely stuffed. So they'd land up, and as long as I didn't actively frighten them off, bump into something or suddenly wave my arms about, they were just going to sit there and digest their food. So this was a different one, but if you've got something you can get to a different angle, then kind of gently move around. As long as you're slow and kind of steady when you're doing things, these are looking for little things that are moving quickly. And if you're moving slowly and not waving your arms around, things like that, there's a good chance they don't even seem to realise you're there. And I've had a dragonfly sitting on a branch before when I was doing a workshop, slightly foolishly maybe, but I said about this, and I said, look, if I do it, just slowly move my hand right above it, just like that, and it just sat there. Probably just thought it was a cloud going past. So as long as you're slow and steady, you can often avoid scaring these things off. With that one, I ended up with almost kind of abstract shots of bits of the body and things like that. I did the end of the abdomen, I did the joint of the wings, and just kind of play around, just sitting there. So subjects where things are likely to, or certainly there's the possibility that with any slight disturbance or anything like that, tend to be hand holding, and that tends to be the technique that I use. If I'm using the 300mm for something like that, I'll probably just use autofocus. But with those higher and higher magnifications, that focusing has got to be so precise that I tend to use this technique. apart from Olympus EM1 Mark III a couple of years ago for a trial, and nearly always used autofocus. So if your camera autofocus is fine, then yeah, make use of it as long as you're choosing the bit of the subject you want to be doing. The problem can arise if you just get too close and the camera physically can't focus on it. It's then going to go hunting off somewhere else, and you're completely losing that focus, and you've got to try and kind of bring it back. If it's a subject where there's no chance of it flying or anything like that, then if I'm doing it properly, I'll have the camera on a tripod. And it just means you can take the time about it and think a bit more about that composition. So this is up in Scotland at New Lanark at Falls of Clyde. It's a spray from the waterfalls that left all the droplets everywhere. Overcast day. I've taken various pictures of toadstools and then found this one, and I like the kind of Tiffany lamp kind of look to it. So I've got this composition and took this photo, and I sat back and thought, right, what can I do to change this? And I thought, actually, I'm going to put the polarizing filter on, because that will help to enrich the colours. It's an overcast day, so we've got a bit of the shine of the grey sky on there. It's going to warm those colours up. So first thing I did was put the polarizing filter on, and it's giving me that warmer colour. Nothing to do with white balance or anything like that. It's just due to the polarizers. Then I looked at it and thought, right, okay, what else can I change about this? And I thought, well, I don't like that blob there, that highlight behind there, and that's just droplets on a leaf in the background. So I just wiped those off with my thumb. Then chose a slightly higher aperture value to give me slightly greater depth of field, and ended up with. Oh, I knew it was going to do that. Thing, I might need some new batteries in. It wasn't that long since I put new batteries in. Yeah, so I ended up with that. Let's go back to that previous one again. And then that one. So it's slightly darker, slightly greater depth of field. Lost that bright highlight there, and I prefer that shot. I've been showing this picture to people for years, and I see more and more things I would like to have done differently in that time. I certainly should have noticed that orange spot on that leaf. It's probably a silver birch seed that's sitting on there, and I could have picked that off. I could Photoshop it out, but then I wouldn't have anything to say. Apart from that one, that orange blob there, again, it's probably just like a dead leaf or something that I could have plucked out. These brown bits on the edges of the leaf, I should have pushed those out of the shot. There's some brown there as well, but I'm not too fussed about that. But yeah, there are things that I should have noticed and corrected. So I like to remind myself that I should pay more attention to these things, especially when you've got the camera on a tripod, the subject's not going anywhere, the light's not changing. There's nothing to stop you being critical and just thinking, okay, well, actually, I'm going to move that. Because it might be that you do something and think, actually, that was better before. You've still got that picture before. So those are the two main techniques that I use depending on the type of shot that I'm focusing wise for that sort of shot. These days, I'm using a DSLR, it's not a mirrorless camera, so I'm doing most of the composition through the viewfinder. And then I will normally switch to live view and manually focus, zooming in on the point that I actually want on the screen, not with the lens. And just to make sure it's absolutely focused where I want it to be. I can also check depth of field if I want to during that time. With the Pentax as well, when you're in live view, you can actually move the sensor around. So if I thought, actually, I just want to make a millimetre change to move everything over to one side slightly, I can do that just by moving the sensor, which is quite nice. Something none of your cameras do. Not even Olympus. Anyway, resets itself, it's fine. As soon as you come out of live view, it goes back. Flash. We can use Flash for macro stuff, and I don't use, or close-up stuff as well. I don't use a macro-specific setup, so chances are, if you've got a flash gun, you're already 90-odd% of the way to having a decent macro setup. What I use these days is this thing. It's a Flashbender 2 large reflector. On the Rode flash things, they're up to Flashbender 3s now, but 2 works perfectly well. I've got my macro lens on, I'm pointing at some moss that's down here, and the background is over here. So a popular way of lighting macro stuff is to use a ring flash, and the ring flash is a circular flash gun that sits on the front of the lens. I'll show you some pictures that I've shot with ring flash, but generally I don't particularly like them, and the reason I don't really like them is because of the amount of light fall off you get. You know, if I've got moss there and the flash is there and the background of that shot is over here, twice as far away, it's going to get a quarter of the amount of light and it's going to look significantly darker. It's going to be 2 stops darker. So, so this setup here, which is something I could use at an event or something like that. So it's not specifically for macro, but it works quite nicely for macro. So that light's going to come straight down onto the subject from the flash gun, which is further away anyway. So the background is only a third, as far away again, something like that. But a lot of that light's going to be bouncing off of this reflector, and it gives us a soft sort of lighting. As far as the moss is concerned, all this area up here is going to be lit up, and it's when it comes out right, which it does most of the time, it's like a bright but slightly overcast day. So we still have shadows, but they're quite diffused sort of shadows. Macro setup that I used, flash setup that I used was a Centon flash gun, which was just a really cheap one. It's £5 off eBay, and I made a softbox for it out of pebble bin liner. And it worked. I mean, this and the next one is as well. Softboxes do work very well. You know, just a small softbox like that can sit over the end of your lens, and again, it spreads that light out really quite nicely. You can make them yourselves out of milk bottles and all kind of things like that, or just get them off eBay for a £5. But yeah, so the flowers in the background there are lit just as well as this. It's a little bit darker, but not significantly. There's still a bit of a shadow underneath that, so you can see there's kind of direction to the light. There is still some reflection off the wasp, so it's not perfect, but it works very well. And with this shot, if I didn't have it in the flash section, I think it'd be very hard pressed to say that's flash lit at all. And again, that's a £5 flash gun and a pebble bin liner. So something to soften the light. Again, if you have shadows under it, just look very natural kind of shadows. Don't like a bit of grass, but I couldn't move that without the fly going. I did try, but it went when I tried moving that. So yeah, if you've got a flash gun, it works very well for doing, as a macro setup. This is with that large reflector, and again, it helps to spread that light, so things in the background are well lit as well. Still looks flash lit ultimately, but not too badly, I don't think. That's just a fly that was on my patio. It's a female fly. We can start mixing flash and daylight. So we have ambient light for the background here, flash on the foreground. This is actually this is on an upright tree. I've rotated it just so it can be bigger on the screen. Nice thing about digital is we can see the results of this by, you take a shot and see how it looks. And if the background's too light, you leave the shutter open for longer. And if it's too dark, no, hang on. The other way around. Just seeing if anyone picked up on that. If the background's too dark, you leave the shutter open for longer, and if it's too bright, you go for a slightly faster shutter speed and so on. But yeah, we can leave the shutter open to record the ambient light, but the flash light on there is controlled by the power of the flash and your aperture and your ISO. This is with a ring flash, and I think it's more obvious that this is flash lit. You've got quite, it's soft lighting, but it's definitely lit here and darker in the background. It kind of certainly feels lit, artificially lit to me, and it's quite a bright bit in the background here. So I didn't really, I had that flash gun, that ring flash for a little bit, and I didn't really like this, but I did like it as a fill flash. So we're adding in light, still again recording the ambient light, but just using that ring flash to lift the shadows under things and stuff like that. It works quite nicely. Two main reasons why I don't use that anymore. One is that I've already got a flash gun in the camera bag. I don't really want to be carrying another flash gun around that's very specific for one type of photography, because I'm not going to be doing that all the time by any means. The other reason is that it blew up. It was an old flash gun that hadn't been used for a long time, and the capacitors go out of condition in an old flash gun. If you haven't used, you're right if you can't just not use a flash gun for a few months or something, that'd be fine, but this hadn't been used for years, and I just started banging away at it, kind of full on, and the capacitors just expand and eventually pop. But I didn't know about that. I just found out that, I mean, exploded is a bit of a dramatic thing, but it did make quite a loud bang when it's right next to your head. It's a bit of a surprise. Another one here with that ring flash as a fill flash. You've got sunlight coming through from behind, lighting him very nicely in the front there. You can tell it's a boy not because of the very dapper moustache. It's really quite nice because his eyes join in the middle. So true flies will have the male ones, their eyes are joined in the middle, and if it's a female, there'll be a gap between them. I don't know why.
Oscar fly.
That's normally a cue for a lady in the audience to say, because her brains are bigger. But yeah, no one did that time, never mind. Okay, using the flash off the camera gives us more opportunity for playing around with. Again, that really cheap flash gun, I've just had it connected up with a cable. These days, I've got radio triggers and whatever, but whatever works really. So softbox on that one, I've got the flash kind of up here looking down on there. So again, we've got that shadow down there, but it's just lifting the foreground a little bit just to help bring that toadstool out from that background. Up in Scotland, a little bit of pine woodland alongside the Firth of Forth. I've used a diffuse flash to light this bit down here, because this was shaded. Overall, it's an ambient exposure, but polarizing filter on, so it takes the shine off these, but I've used the flash to put a bit of light in there. If you're using a more sophisticated flash than that one, you can dial the power down and all that kind of thing, or use flash exposure compensation and start playing around with getting that balance. With that flash gun, it just fired the same amount all the time. So if it was too bright and I had it here, I can move it over here and it'll make it a bit darker. The further away it was, the darker the less light's actually reaching the subject. We can start trying to create other types of lighting. So this was in a damp and kind of dreary woodland in November of 2 or 3 years ago. Without flash, it was a 15-second exposure. It was so dull, but I've tried to give it the look of sunlight by having the flash over here, behind and above and to the right of the subject, firing through a slightly warming coloured gel on the flash as well. So it's warming the colour of that flash up. Just trying to make it look a little bit like sunlight. Same technique used here. It was a nice sunny day here, but these were in the shade, and I thought this all looked a little bit flat, and I wanted to give it a little bit of a boost, like there was kind of winter sunlight hitting them to make it look like that instead. So the setup that I was using there was have the flash over here, another Rogue flash thing on it. It's a 3-in-1 grid. Probably didn't really need it, but it was just a convenient way of putting the gel in there to warm it up. The flare that I'm shooting is this one just here, and I'm triggering that flash with the pop-up flash on here. My current camera doesn't have a pop-up flash, so I was forced to buy some £20 triggers that are just kind of dumb triggers, but they work very well. From the flash's point of view, you can see the one that I'm actually kind of shooting at. You can see the tripod there, the legs splayed out. Everything's very handy for getting the kind of composition that I might want it to be. And you can see the colour of those gels in there to give it that warm, warmth to the light there. So yeah, taking the flash off the camera just gives us more possibilities. And I do like trying to create kind of a sunlit look when the sun's not really there. So again, just the bare flash gun actually sat on the wall at the end of my garden with a yellow sort of gel on it to give it that very kind of golden coloured light. If you want to see how I actually did that, I've got a YouTube channel with 5 videos on it, one of which is how I shot that. Yeah, so the camera's on the tripod, and I just tried the flash in different positions. The sun's gone down, or going down the other side of the house, so it didn't look like that at all. This one, no flash for this shot. It's a girl. I got the camera on the tripod already because I was taking pictures of bluebells. Saw this hoverfly sitting on the bluebell there, and I thought, I'll take a picture of her. So I took that picture, looked at it, and thought, it looks a little bit drab. It looks like it wants a bit of a lift colour-wise. It wants a little bit of oomph. So I thought, right, stick the flash on, was using a softbox at the time, so I put the softbox